Welcome to Project Find Your Fire. Tonight's event is all about success.
And the lack of failure. You see, so many of us, so many times perceive failure. And we're going to teach you and show you how failure doesn't even really exist. All that exists is success. And so we're going to take you there. We're going to show you through this. You see, in life, we all go through this motion. There are times in our life where we will not meet our own expectations. We're going to deal specifically with that. There's going to be times in our life when we hit pitfalls. There's going to be times in our life where things just aren't going the way they're supposed to be going. And so in our minds, we perceive all these things as failures. And so throughout life, we start to exhibit this fear. We all have fears of different things, but this fear of failure can be paralyzing. It keeps us from doing the important things in life and doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we're going to show you how to get by that tonight.
So if you have not already grabbed your handout, when we're done this evening, please go to projectfindyourfire.com and find the handout there. Do you have a backslash for that one?
Yes, it's backslash. I'm going to have to think. I know it's in the description, but the success of failure is what it is.
Maybe we'll just click on the link.
Yes, the link is in the description. And if you can't find it for some reason, just reach out to us. Actually, I don't think that's the URL now that I'm thinking about it.
We will get you the information. We will post it again. But if you don't have the handout, it's great to get because it kind of reiterates the information that we're presenting tonight. Okay, what is failure?
Failure is, by definition, the lack of success. So in preparing for some different things, I once went to find what is failure? How do we as a society define failure? And what I found is failure is a lack of success, which then in my mind prompted me to take one more step and say, well, then what is success? And so in searching through a number of definitions, and I found many different definitions, but that pointed me towards the most root definition. You see, success comes from the Latin succedere, which means to do something. So success, by definition, then, is to do something. Now, here at Project Find Your Fire, we have our own definition for success. Our definition for success is any time you are moving towards your goal. That doesn't mean you hit your goal. You can fall very short of your goal, but as long as you're moving towards your goal, you are successful, which then ties into the Latin definition too, to do something. So if you're doing something, you're successful.
So a couple key points when you're talking about definitions of success and failure, and these go to the root of what we teach, which is understanding your own definitions, your own goals, and making sure you're on your own path. So by definition of moving forward to be successful, you are on your path moving forward towards your goals.
And it doesn't matter what your goals are. Here's the example that I like to use. Imagine a 10-year-old out in his backyard throwing the football around on a Saturday afternoon. And one day he figures out how to throw the perfect spiral. It's a great pass every time, and he can hit the fence every time. Does that make him any less successful than any of the superstars, Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers? Now, clearly their bank accounts are different, but that's not the level of success. As long as that little boy is moving towards his goal, he is just as successful as anybody else throwing a football.
So make sure that you are defining your success and your movement based on your goals, but also based on your own set and not somebody else's set expectations.
Right. That's a great point that she mentioned expectations, because we need to take just a moment here and talk about expectations, because when we experience failure, what that means to us is that we have fallen short of our expectations. We've fallen short of our goals. We all have these things that we expect of ourselves, and many times we don't get those. But if you're able to trade your expectations for appreciation, that gives you a completely different viewpoint. So what we do ask you to do is get rid of expectations. See, expectations are about the end result. We have a belief of an end result. Instead, we ask you to set standards. Now, standards are a quality that we are achieving too. So standards are about the process. Expectations are about the result. Whatever the process is, set your standards. Set a standard that you're going to do the best that you possibly can every time. Set a standard that you're going to fill your mind and your body with great stuff. Set a standard.
Set a standard to live by your values.
Exactly. And so as long as you are meeting your standards, it doesn't matter what the end result is, because you're still going to feel that level of success, that level of appreciation for yourself, instead of the expectation, which is about the result. That's an important point to take note of as we move forward through this entire process.
Okay, so we're going to take just a pause here.
Pause.
We want everyone to be thinking now about what you have defined in the past as failure. Kind of think about that, and then think about this new definition. The new definition is really not about how you define failure, but really more on how you define success. So, how do you define success, or how have you defined it in the past? Has it been based on some set of reaching a goal or reaching an endpoint versus the journey versus the day-by-day standards that you live by? So just take a moment and think about maybe how you had previously defined failure and success, and where we're rewiring, redefining what those really mean. So let's define again. What is success? By our definition, success is any time you're moving towards your goal.
This could be anything in your life, even those little simple things. When you're cooking in the kitchen, when you're doing laundry, you can be successful. So many times when we ask people what their definition of success is, it has something to do with wealth or value of some sort, of materialism. All of these things is what we perceive as successful. But success is so much more than that. It actually has nothing to do with wealth. It has nothing to do with materialism. It has everything to do with moving towards. Any time you're moving towards your goal, no matter what that goal is.
So I like to use that example when you talk about that. If you have a value or standard and you want to live a life in joy and happiness, you can choose that. And you can choose to get up and do your activities, the simple things, with joy. And when you accomplish the laundry or the cooking or the errands, and you've done it with a joyful heart, you have actually reached your goal and you've been successful.
Absolutely. Now, there are 3 tips to help you move in a positive direction. Number 1 is to remove failure as an option. This is something we all fall into the trap of. I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to try this, and if that doesn't work, then I'm just not going to do that anymore. If you remove failure as an option, you're not going to take that option, because we, just like water and just like electricity, will choose the path of least resistance. We will every time. And that exit to Failureville, down your road, as soon as you hit a roadblock, that exit to Failureville is, of course, the easiest route. It's the path of least resistance, and so you will take that path. If you remove that exit, your only option then is to be able to move past the roadblocks in your way. It's really that simple. People always have an out when they embark on something. They always give themselves an exit. They give themselves a plan B. Quit following plan B. If plan B was that great, it would be plan A. Just stay on plan A and figure out your way around it. That's the way to move past those roadblocks for that one, number one. Now, number two, the number two tip to move in a positive direction is to learn. Now, learning is innately human. It's a natural process. Babies in the womb are learning, and nobody ever taught them how to learn. They're learning voices, they're learning songs, they're learning their own routines inside the womb. Nobody ever showed them how to do that. Learning is a natural human capacity. And so to not learn, to not get a lesson from something that happened in your life, you have to make a conscious effort not to learn. And number three, the number three tip to move forward in a positive direction is to remove all of those self-imposed definitions of what failure is. Maybe you say, well, I fail if I don't meet my goal. I fail if I don't meet my deadlines at work. I fail if I, don't have a full supper for the kids. I fail if the laundry's not done. I fail if all of these different things. We've defined failure, but there's a part of our brain that has defined that failure for us, and we'll talk about that. You have to remove all of those self-imposed definitions of failure and let failure be nothing more than the lack of success. Success, we know, is to do anything. So those are the three tips.
Yes, and don't forget those self-imposed things that we put on our plate, that we have in our mind, that they're almost invisible. We just have them and we think we have to accomplish them in a day. Don't forget to remove those that you put on your plate that other people define for you, such as family and friends. Please remove those. You're the only one who gets to decide what you do, what is your goals, and what is your success.
Right. So as we work through this process now, there were three big things that we need to define and sort of work through. Number one is, what is failure? What is success? And we've sort of gone through that one already. The next thing we have to deal with is, what is fear?
Why do we have to deal with what is fear?
Because fear is actually a very exciting thing. Fear is exciting, and here's how it works.
Wait, what is fear?
Fear is
an emotion. It's an emotion. So that's why it's so important. We were talking about definitions of what failure is and what success is, and we're going to tie those to this emotion of what is fear.
And we all also know that emotion drives motion. That motion gives us a specific result. Now, here's how this works. We have a part of our brain back here called the limbic system. Now, the limbic system is the super secretary. And here's how this works. When we experience a stimulus of some sort, our limbic system, our super secretary, goes into work. And that super secretary starts pulling out all the files. And these files are all of the things we heard, all of the things we saw, all of the things we've experienced, all of those things people have told us, all of those things that we've said and not even meant it maybe. So our secretary is pulling out all of these files. And if those files are mostly negative, she shoots out an emotion, in this case, fear. Now, here's the great thing about fear. Fear, physiologically speaking, is exactly the same as excitement. Think about it. When you become afraid of something, our palms sweat, our heartbeat races, we talk faster, we tend to slur our words, our breath becomes shorter and more rapid. The same is true when you get excited about something. Think about the last time you were excited. The same thing was happening. Your palms were sweating. Your heartbeat started to racing. Your breath became shorter. You talked faster. Fear and excitement are exactly the same. The only difference is those files that the super secretary is shooting out at us. One of them is based on fear, gives us that emotion. The other one is excitement. Now, the excitement emotion gives a reward. There's a chemical release going on in our brain. So here's the great thing about fear. Some of the smaller fears are easy to beat because you just verbalize that you're excited about that. I'm afraid of public speaking. Before you go on to public speak, just say to yourself, this is exciting. This message I'm giving, this is exciting. I'm excited about giving this message to people, whatever it is. And that will defeat the fear files that are being pushed out to give us that emotion.
Yeah, and I do want to talk here just for a second that fear comes in all sizes. It's still the emotion of fear, but they can be very, very small things and still have the same emotion as very, very large things. So one of the examples that I have is that when I go to the pool, jumping into the pool, I have the same amount of, it's almost fear. It's the emotion of fear and excitement, but it's a moment where I have to take and I have to think through it, and then I have to jump in the pool. Now it sounds so minor, but it's the same feelings that stop us that we have to process before we take an action. But that's the same fear that would be if I was going to go bungee jumping, right? On the edge of a bridge and you're looking out and you have to jump. It's the same fear and it's the same motion that you have to take. You have to jump.
That's exactly it. It's convincing your brain. I use those words. I'm not sure if I should use those words because we don't have to convince our brain of anything. What we do have to do, though, is rewire our brain to get out of the fear, know that what the limbic system is shooting out at us are fear-based files of what we've heard and what we've seen and what we've experienced and all of these different things. That becomes the emotion of fear. But if we can become aware of that, we can alter those files that are coming out, because everything else in our body is exactly the same as excitement. All we have to do is put a stop to the files and push out an excitement file, and then the brain is going to give us a reward, and we're going to want more of that and more of that. The brain doesn't reward fear the way it rewards excitement.
So why is this so important? Why are we talking about fear in the midst of failure and success? So there's a couple things to note. One is we're talking about the power of the mind. So fear is holding us back from doing something. So it's really important to understand that and why and how your brain works and why it works the way it does. But why do we find ourselves at the edge of that moment where we need to step forward and we have the fear? And in some cases, you're able to move forward. And in some cases, this is preventing people from taking that step. Public speaking, taking that job, stepping across the street, meeting a neighbor, meeting a new friend, going to a new event. There are real fears that people have. So what we're talking about is that when we go back and talk about success, and we talk about success is always moving towards your goals. Well, one of the things in what we do is we talk about what do you want clearly? What are your goals? What is your vision of where you want to go? And what we identify is that fear prevents people from moving forward towards their goals. So if success is always moving towards your goals, and it doesn't mean you have to reach the end all at once, it's the itty bitty steps towards it, then what we're talking about is the emotion and the understanding of how we recognize fear, how we rewire that so that we can continue to move forward.
That's exactly right. And so there's a method behind our madness. And so there's a reason we talked about failure first, and then we talk about fear. Because if you're going to do a backflip on your bicycle, you must first understand your bicycle. And secondly, you must understand a backflip. And thirdly, you must understand doing the backflip on your bicycle. And so thirdly, now we're going to talk about specifically the fear of failure.
Not the fear of flipping on your bicycle?
No, there's no
Okay,
fear
okay,
there.
Okay.
There's no fear, you just do it. Okay, so the fear of failure. When we talk about the fear of failure, we must focus our energies on two specific areas. The first is before the failure. Now, right now I'm giving you the failure in parentheses, quotations, because we know from our definitions that failure doesn't exist. All we have is successes because you're doing something. So we're going to talk about before the failure and the moment after the failure. Okay.
And then we're not going to have failure after this whole session. There'll be no more failure.
No more failure. Okay, so let's talk about before. This is the part where we teach you to sort of self-coach. This is what these things are. Now, of course, if you need more in-depth things, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us. There are a lot of different ways to get a hold of us. But there are 4 questions that you need to ask yourself before, when you think about before the failure happened. Number 1, what's the worst that could happen? Let's say, for example, that you want to quit your 9-to-5 corporate job and start your own business and do whatever you're doing, whatever your passion is. But you're afraid to do that because you're afraid to fail. But really, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that your new business flounders and you end up having to get another job, which really isn't all that bad. It's not the end of the world. That's the worst that could happen. Lots of times when we say, what's the worst that could happen, and we think about it, it's really not that bad. The second question we have to ask ourselves is, where does the fear come from? Now, remember, this is our limbic system talking to us. So does the fear that we have of whatever we're embarking on, fear of failing, what is that coming from? Is it because of something we've heard? Is it because of something that we've experienced? Is it because of something that we read somewhere, or these stories that we've seen, or something that somebody told us? A combination of all of those?
It's really doing your fact finding now based on what you're defining as that failure, that experience. It's really you coming up with those facts that you've gathered over your experiences, over your learnings, over your lifetime. What are those? And it's very important that you understand where your fears are coming from. They're real fears, they're real emotions. So it's doing an inventory of those.
The next question, the third question you have to ask yourself is, why are you not taking action? Clearly, you're not taking action because it's a fear of failure, but is it really because, are you worried about making the wrong decision? Are you worried about pain? Now, in my life, from my experiences, I've done a lot of things that led to a lot of pain. And so in my mind, that's one of the things. I'm like, I know that hurts and I shouldn't do it again. But because I don't have a fear of failure, I usually do and end up in pain. So maybe it's you're afraid of disappointing somebody. Maybe you're afraid of looking like an idiot or looking like a fool if you try to do this and you can't meet your goal or whatever it is. And so as long as you understand where your success is, it doesn't matter what anybody else's definition of success is.
Go ahead and go to the last one. Then I was going to give a couple examples here because you reminded me of a couple things.
Okay. And the fourth question you have to ask yourself in the area before the failure, what is the cost of not taking action? Of starting your new business or starting the nonprofit or going on this adventure
Or not jumping off the bridge.
not jumping off the
Bungee
bridge,
jumping.
whatever it is. What is the cost of not taking that action? And I'm not talking about necessarily a monetary cost. I'm talking about, do you have relationships that are suffering because of that? Do you have another business that's suffering because of that? Do you have these different things in our life? There is a cost somewhere of not taking that action. What is it?
So what I was going to say, not to interrupt you when you were giving the 4 questions we ask ourselves, but I was going to bring up a couple things in relationship. When you're asking yourself these questions, and these are important questions, you can ask yourself every one of these in something that you can remember from the past that maybe you felt like was a failure because you did or didn't do something. But also as you today are thinking about and struggling maybe with some things of some fears, right? This is what you're looking at. You're looking at these, why am I not taking that next step? So you're doing kind of this inventory with these 4 questions. And I was, as you were going through them, I was just using in my mind the example that I have, which just happens to be one that's relevant now for me, is I get up early in the morning and I go to the pool. And, I can get in the pool every time I go, get in the pool, but it takes that moment from when I'm standing on the edge to actually do an inventory of these 4 questions before I can actually commit to getting in. And it sounds so simple, but it really does make a difference when I'm standing there instead of living in that fear of like, it's going to be cold and, it's going to be hard. And instead of living in that state and then convincing myself that I should just leave or not go at all before I even leave the house. Instead, when you do this inventory as you're going through that moment of almost second guessing, like, should I or should I not? And then realizing it's just fear and then starting to ask these questions, it provides clarity and it allows you to move forward.
That's exactly right. I mean, we take instinct almost too literally. And in our head, also, we have this thing that lives called ego. Now, ego is always looking out for danger. It's always been its job. But if you let your brain control you instead of you using your brain, you're going to be stuck in a lot of different places because it's going to convince you that you are afraid of something. You have to get out of ego and start living your life from your heart. And these answers are going to be a lot easier to answer once you start doing that and you shut ego down. Ego helps run the limbic system. So that is like telling the supervisor to get lost also. So the super secretary quits doing what they're doing.
And we want you to use these so that you can use the power of the mind.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this fear of failure. Let's talk about after.
All right. So after the event of the failure, here are 4 questions, again, to ask yourself. We're teaching you to self-coach. So do these. Take the time to do this. Let's say you experience something in your life and you're like, dang, I failed at that so badly. That was such a terrible fail. Ask yourself these questions. Number 1, what worked? Because there was something that worked well. Some part of that whole process was exactly in line and exactly what you were supposed to do. Secondly, what didn't work? And because you perceived it as a failure, there clearly then was something that didn't work. What didn't work? Be very specific when you answer these questions to yourself, because you're going to start being able to lay out a roadmap of this whole event, and you're going to see that point where you should have took a left at Albuquerque, right? So if you know that quote, I love you. If you know where the turn went wrong. Number 3, what factors were beyond your control? Now, it could be any number of things. So if, let's take, for example, a field goal kicker in the NFL. He kicks the kick, he misses. What worked, what didn't, what factors were beyond his control. The wind may have been blowing some crazy way. The rain may have been coming. These are things that we can't control in our own lives. It might have been an outside force like that. It may have been somebody else who did something. Now, I say that, and I'm going to put a huge asterisk on it, because that person, if it involves another person, that person is not responsible for whatever you perceive as a failure. You own this. You have to own it, because that's where it's going to be fixed. But what factors couldn't you control? You can always respond to those factors. And number 4, what are you going to do differently next time? The next time you try this, because I know you're going to try it again, because you know what success is, and as long as you're doing something, you're successful. And I know that you guys don't quit, you don't choose Failureville. You're going to get past the roadblock, so you're going to try it again. What are you going to do differently? Do not do the same thing you did before, because it's going to give you the same result.
The key here is you're doing an inventory. You're doing an inventory on those 4 questions before and the 4 questions after. And one of the things is that fear is an emotion, like we talked about, and it drives you and you feel it. And if we're not careful, it will cause us to react or respond in ways that aren't moving us towards our goals. So these questions are to take that emotion and put some logic, right? Use our brain and the power of what we have here for us to get us back on track to be moving towards our goals, towards success. So when you do these, there's an emotional charge that comes with how you feel, a fear of how you feel about the experience or the fear before you make the decisions. But you're doing an inventory to really state the facts. This is more like facts based on your experience.
Right. And don't let ego and your limbic system interpret those facts for you. Just take a look at it
Short and sweet.
the way it is, short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Yep. So before, what's the worst thing that could happen? Where does the fear come from? What did I hear? What did I see? Where is this coming from? Number 3, why are you not taking action? What are you really afraid of? You're looking like a fool, feeling the pain, disappointing somebody. And number 4, what is the cost of not taking action? Because there is a cost. After the fact, what worked in the process? What didn't work in the process? There's clearly something in each of those categories. What factors couldn't you control? You can respond to them, but you can't control them. And what are you going to do differently next time? Now, with all of that said, let's do the wrap up.
Failure does not exist. It doesn't even exist anymore. Only success.
Yeah. And when we look at the definitions, failure really doesn't exist. Success is the only thing that does exist. Something happening. That's success.
And a new definition of success is always moving towards your goals.
Exactly. So now we know that failure is really success, and success is really exciting. And excitement is the same as what we called fear. So if you're afraid of failure, you're really kind of afraid of success and feeling excited. So if you're excited about success, you can also be excited about the fear of failure. See how this works?
I mean, it really is profound when you look at the content that we're giving you here, because we're basically giving you the foundation of the emotional and the power of the brain to turn this all around. So if you are in moments where you're feeling like you are failing, or you're feeling like fear is holding you back, we've just literally changed the definition and what it means and propelled that no matter what, it's success.
Right. It's all about reframing reality. Now, you've heard me talk before, reality doesn't really exist. What does exist is our perceptions of real life events. And up to this point, you've been perceiving these moments in your life as failure. And because of that, you've developed this fear of failing for whatever reason. But that's just a perception. That's not reality. All we have to do is reframe that, look at it from a different angle, from a different perspective, and you're going to see how easy it is to succeed and how hard it really is to fail. All right, so the next point in the wrap up is if failure doesn't exist, you can't hardly be afraid of it.
Can only be excited now.
You
Excited
can
about,
only be excited.
be excited about reaching your goals, about working towards them, get excited about life, about your new appreciation and your standards.
And the last point in the wrap up is if success is the only option, then you really have no other option than to succeed. It sounds so simple.
It does sound so simple. Sounds so simple. Remember to remove failure as an option. So that's always key is the thoughts and the options. Get rid of those. Know that you're always learning and that failure doesn't exist anymore, but everything that we do that moves us forward is learning. And make sure that you're removing other people's self-imposed, I don't even want to say expectations, but self-imposed kind of demands, or I want to say expectations on this with other people's expectations of you. Remove those from your self-imposed definitions.
Right. You have control. Remove the judgment. That is such a profound technique also. And maybe we should spend a little bit of time another time on that as well. So right now, does anybody have any questions about the fear of failure? Go ahead and type them into the chat area or unmute yourself to ask whatever is easiest for you.
And don't forget to get the handout. We'll put the link out on the social media so you can get the link if you haven't already. The handout just kind of brings us all back together.
And if you do have other questions that you'd rather not talk about in this setting, you want them to be more private, then just reach out to us. All right.
If there's no questions, thank you for joining us on another evening and on a wonderful topic. You can only succeed from here.
We're so grateful. We know there are many ways you could be spending this 45 minutes of your day or morning, wherever you are. And we are so grateful that you chose to spend them with us. Until next time.
Until next time.